Northern New York Community Podcast, stories from the heart of our community. We're back with another edition of the podcast. Thanks again for listening to another inspiring community story. I'm your host, Max Del Signor, and today's guest was a lawyer, district attorney, and county court judge during his lifetime in Northern New York. And this person also devoted his life to helping the community whenever he was asked. He played an instrumental role in establishing a couple local nonprofits, helped generate support for the area agencies, and has been a longtime advocate for several community causes. Lee Clary is here to talk about his time in the North Country, the role of being the county's district attorney and court judge, and how philanthropy played a role in his involvement and love for the area. Lee, we appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Pleased to be here.
Being a district attorney and county court judge seemingly comes with a lot of pressure, I would think. You experienced great success, though, in both positions. What would you say were just the factors behind responsibly handling each of those roles?
Well, there are pressures. There's no getting around that. When I became DA in 1977, I was the person who did the presentments of the grand jury and did all the felony trials, because there was myself and the two assistants, both of which, or three assistants actually. It was busy. We had a lot of interesting cases and a lot of work to do. The pressure of being district attorney, especially if you're doing the felony trials, is pretty substantial. I think much more than being county court judge, because you have to, the preparation that goes into trying a lawsuit is significant. And being the judge, you're kind of the referee in a sense during the trial, and then you're, obviously if there's a conviction, it's a very important role in sentencing, making sure it's a fair and just sentence. So, yeah, there are pressures.
Can you share a little insight into just that preparation piece? You mentioned being a DA. There's a lot of time that has to go into how you kind of look at the case, how you go about that. What were some of the keys you thought to make sure you were prepared for each of those cases?
Well, that's the key to it for being either a district attorney or a defense attorney. Any lawyer that tries cases is preparation. The person who's the best prepared has a big advantage, especially if his opposition is not as well prepared, because so we have to look at the file, review it, talk to the witnesses, make sure that they're obviously available and they're on board as far as being willing to come in and testify, and then you're trying to look at what's the opposition going to present, what types of witnesses, cross-examination. You prepare for that right before the trial starts. So there's a lot of time involved in that. And if you're in a trial, in a lawsuit, and you're the district attorney, you also have other responsibilities during the day. So, but you're obligated to be in front of the county court judge from, say, 9:30 till 5 with a break for lunch. So you have to do a lot of work before and a lot of work after. Nights are, especially when you get down to the nitty-gritty in a trial, or even in the beginning, whenever something comes up, it needs some work. That's when you have to do the preparation work. Weekends, it's a very, very time-consuming and interesting, and for a person who wants to be a trial lawyer, and I always wanted to be one. I don't know why. It's crazy, because it is pressure-packed, but it's where the action is, where the excitement is, where the human interest, the stories are told in criminal court cases. So I enjoyed it very much.
Well, and you're not a native of the area, too. It took some time before you came to Northern New York. Where did you grow up originally, and what was life like growing up for you as a kid?
I really grew up in Syracuse, although I was born in Geneva, but I spent most of my growing up years from like 3rd or 4th grade until I graduated from law school in Syracuse, with the exception of 1 year that I worked down in Manhattan for about 8 months. So I grew up. I'm from a single parent family. My mother, my father split up a couple of times when I was really young, and then from the 3rd grade on, so when I was about 9 or 10, somewhere in there, we were raised by my mother with my grandfather and grandmother's help in Syracuse. We lived with them, my two sisters and brother and I. So it was interesting. It was interesting. I guess we were poor, but we never knew it. Nobody thought that they were deprived or anything, and we had a great, childhood and high school programs and everything. We were fine and dandy.
And your wife Shirley didn't live too far away from where you grew up.
Well,
is that correct?
Yes, we moved to 1960. We moved up to Roberts Avenue in Syracuse, and we were on Roberts and Crossett, and my wife was on Roberts and Grandview, about 3 fairly short blocks away. So it was a walking courtship, and it was pretty cool.
Now, for law school, where did the interest for pursuing that career come from? And do you remember how old you were when you started to think, this is the route I want to take?
Well, yeah, I was about 22, I think, really, when I started seriously to consider law, because I was in the seminary studying to be a priest for 4.5 years, and I did obtain a bachelor's degree there. But as you can imagine, with a bachelor's degree with a major in philosophy and a minor in Latin, employable? Not so much. I had so many interviews when I dropped out of the seminary, federal and state civil service jobs, and it was tough. And then I got the job in New York City, worked down there for 8 months, and it was at that point, during my 8 months there, that because there were a couple of guys that were going to night school, law school, that were working in that same office. It wasn't a huge office by any means. And I kind of got some inspiration from them, but I did not want to go to night school for 4 years in New York City and work full time. That was just too much. So then I decided to come back home to Syracuse, and I went to Syracuse Law School, lived with my mom and my siblings.
The difference between being in the seminary, practicing to become a priest, and then pursuing law seems to be a dichotomy there.
Yeah.
What did some of the education you received from your time in the seminary, how did that help prepare you for law school and becoming a lawyer?
Well, you had course in ethics, and that's when you're a lawyer, you're bound by a significant canon of ethics, and there's a lot of similarities in there. It was good discipline. We got up at 5:15 in the major seminaries, went to bed about 20 to 10. There was very strict rules in those times. We took, the one thing I remember, the preparation for certain courses. We took a course in cosmology, not cosmetology. This is cosmology. It's a study of the universe and and we had an oral exam for a final given in Latin.
Wow.
Yeah. You want to talk about pressure? I mean, I think I felt more pressure before I went in that, and it was one-on-one with the professor, and I felt more pressure going into there than I think maybe I ever felt in my life. I mean, So it was an interesting experience. I think discipline, I don't know, was I thought it was a pretty good preparation for just about any kind of a career. I didn't go there to be prepared for a career in law by any means. I was in there for the long run, but made the decision not to go further after a lot of thought and discussions with people and my, counselors at the seminary. So it worked out.
You had mentioned before when you worked in New York City and before we did the podcast today that there was kind of a tipping point, a moment for you personally where you began to understand how important it was to give back. Could you share a little bit about that experience?
Sure.
And how you started to kind of dabble a little bit in community engagement and philanthropy?
Yeah, it was, I lived actually had a room on 107th Street and Amsterdam Avenue in New York, way up on the Upper West Side. And I remember it was $11 a week. And So on our street was a Catholic church, and of course I was Catholic, and so I obviously became a parishioner there. And came a time when they had what we would call a bishop's appeal or Hope Appeal in Syracuse, where they're trying to raise some money for projects. And they had us, I volunteered along with a whole bunch of other people to go out and collect for, a few days. And I went, I was given a few cards, and I went to the one apartment I remember was not very far from mine, of substantial Hispanic families, I think 3 generations. There were 7, 8 people there. And, it was neat and everything, but you knew that these folks did not have anything, really, any substance at all as far as. And I said, I almost felt like saying, well, it's been nice visiting you, and I wish you a lot of luck, or whatever, and not take any money because I didn't think they could afford to give us any money. I was wrong. They gave money, not a lot, but I went out of there with a whole different feeling about people, their ability and their generosity, basic generosity of even the poorest of poor. And so that led me to maybe have a different slant on it. So I might think about giving myself, and since I was doing better than they were, I should turn back or turn in some of that cash and do something with it.
Well, and you had eventually, once you completed law school, made your way up to northern New York. And before you made your move here, did you know where Watertown was or the North Country? Had you been up here previously?
Yeah, I had been. I was a camper and a counselor and a dishwasher. I guess camper, dishwasher. I think I was a counselor, but at least a camper and a dishwasher at Camp Towsey up in Millside Lake outside of Redwood for 3 or 4, summers. And so I was familiar with Jefferson County. I worked, after I left the seminary, for my uncle in a trucking company as a trucker's helper, driver's helper on a furniture delivery. We used to come up to Watertown on, maybe once a month. So I generally was familiar with the geography. I did not know a soul in Watertown, though, when I moved up here, except for the people in the firm. That I joined, Convoy Firm in Watertown, and those are the only people I had known before I actually made the move.
Carl Bachman was the one who actually recruited you to come to join the law firm, correct?
Yeah, he did. He came down to Syracuse Law School, and he was a good friend of Dean Miller, and he said I could use a young lawyer, didn't say young man, but when I graduated from law school, it was 95 to 98% male-dominated field. That was crazy. But especially considering all the changes, and it has worked out to be so, fortunate for everybody, but especially for the gals that wanted to be lawyers. So in any event, Dean Miller and I had talked a little bit about maybe if there's a job opening that was something I'd be interested in. I told him what I wanted to do. I'm mainly interested in doing trials if I could, or at least start with them. So Carl and I, became acquainted, and he interviewed me, and I went up, said I'd do it. I wanted to give it a whirl.
And Carl also was maybe the same person who got you engaged in the community, correct?
Yep, sure did. It's another memory that's just very vivid. After I went up to the firm, we were working for a while. How long, I don't know. And Carl had me in the office one day, and he says, Lee, he says, I think that every young lawyer ought to do some volunteer work, some community service. They ought to work for some not-for-profit or be on some boards, and do something to give back to the community. And he says, I know just the community service and not-for-profit that you should be working for. And I says, oh, what's that? He says, the March of Dimes. He happened to be the campaign director that year for the March of Dimes. So I says, sounds good, Carl. So I became, as well as quite a few other good people that I met in Watertown, became involved as board members. But we did a lot of work too, which was great. We sold bread. I drove some high school kids out and about in the community, and we sold bread in January, which wasn't a lot of fun when it was like 0 or 5 below. And we had a couple of those kinds of Januaries. And we were involved in the Mother's March. I remember we were short of volunteers one year, and we had buttons that say, "Today I am a mother." So I wore one of those and I went out and tried to raise some money for the March of Dimes, and it was a great experience. Great experience.
Well, and what kind of transpired over time, it seems, after that, there were a lot of other activities you were asked to be involved with. You and your wife, Shirley, were asked to kind of help participate in. One thing we talked about a little bit before this interview was your assistance or your help in establishing the Watertown Urban Mission and the Credo Community Center. What was that experience like in collaborating with other community members to set these nonprofits up to provide such a vital service in the area?
Well, to say that I helped establish would be, that would be puffing. That would be above and beyond what I actually did. But we had a group of people. For Credo, it was Father Ray Wertman, it was Charlie and Edie Marcellus. They were the folks that got it going, especially Edie and Father Ray, who were wonderful people and still are. We helped along with the Mayfies, Phil and Joanne Mayfie. Phil was city court judge for years in City of Watertown, and a great guy. And he was the low man on the totem pole at the convoy firm when I came, and then when I walked in the door, he ascended up the ladder a little bit. So, but he was a great guy, and he worked hard on both of those organizations. And it was actually Archie and Rosie Laverty and Jim Cordew, Reverend Jim Cordew, and his wife Shirley established the Urban Mission along with the help of Jack Smiley, a whole bunch of people who, back then, a lot of the churches and ministers were instrumental in that. So I helped with some donations and got the word around and put my name on the mortgage along with 4 other folks for the farm at Credo out in Jenkins Road in Pamela. Fortunately, the payments were all made. We kidded because the 5 families that did that said, well, if things go belly up, we can all have a commune out there. We got a big ranch house out there and a farm, and we can grow vegetables or whatever. And so we kidded about it, but it was a successful program from almost the beginning. It was a little bit controversial, but it sure took off, and the state helped, and we have what Credo is today, which is a huge program and an asset to the community.
What did you learn the most from those experiences? Navigating the obstacles of helping establish a nonprofit, but then getting it up and running. What were the personal takeaways you took from that experience?
Well, I think Edie and Father Ray and Jim Cordew could tell you a lot more about how they got it established. I just was along for the ride. They needed a donation, fine. If they needed something else, some of the people, volunteered to paint and do this. I mean, when things were really beginning, and then I tried to be helpful in getting the word out, and it was really it's funny because Credo and the Urban Mission started almost the same year, within a year or two of each other, and that's over, it's almost 50 years old now, or 50 years old, both institutions.
What was it like to be able to give back or to help in the community along with your wife, Shirley? To be able to do that together as a couple?
It was a great feeling. We've got a wonderful community here in Jefferson County and the North Country. Financially, we may not be the richest county in the state by far, but or the richest area. We have our problems, but we've got a lot of wonderful natural assets. And we've also got some great organizations that, and so to help them, whatever I could do, it's just a great feeling to see them grow and be successful and help so many people, like Urban Mission, like Credo. It's just been great. And then when I retired, Shirley and I retired within 2 days of one another. And you're asked, Don Alexander asked me to be on the North Country Community Foundation board. And I knew about the foundation, but I wasn't particularly close to it. I have 3 kids, my oldest 3 kids, all benefited from scholarships, some aid for them to go to school. And we had 3 children in 4 years, and most of the time when they were being educated at college, I was district attorney, and the money wasn't substantial, and that was a big help to me. And I said, yeah, I think if you've been giving something, you ought to be giving back. And so, sure, I said, I'll be on the board. I don't know what great expertise I bring to anything, but I'll give it a shot. And it was a wonderful 10-year experience. Met so many great people, and established some friendships, and I was a big fan of Alex Velto. I thought he was a wonderful guy. And Randy Richardson, who succeeded him, is a terrific guy, and both have big hearts, and the programs that have been started and been continued to be supported by Foundation are near and dear to me. So,
what was the best, or what were the best experiences of serving on the Community Foundation board in comparison maybe to the other boards or committees that you served on?
Right. Well, I always said, what's better job can you have than giving away other people's money? So, it was great. But one of the things, one of the areas that I was particularly attracted to, and this I think started towards the end of Alex's being director of, before his untimely passing, he started this non-traditional scholarship help. And in other words, people who were not your 4-year high school going into college as 18, 19-year-olds, and then of course that program was very successful and been funded quite generously for years. But this was more the person who maybe was switching careers, had started off doing something and that didn't work out, and then wanted to do something else. But at that point, they were maybe a single parent, or maybe they were in a house with 3 or 4 kids, and they needed some educational or some training, like for career training, and they couldn't afford it. And this non-traditional scholarship program was right on the money. And we had a committee that used to interview people for those scholarships. And boy, the stories we heard, and it was just a pure pleasure to be involved in that committee, be able to award those scholarships. And we had some great success stories, and I'm sure they're continuing to be successful, because boy, if you can get somebody that has, really in kind of in the middle of the road here, wondering where do I go now, and this is not something that's working out for me. I want to do something else. I know what I want to do, but I can't get there because I just can't afford it. It's a great solution. So that was one area that I particularly liked.
During the course of your time living in the North Country, whether it's you personally, you and Shirley doing some things together, or whether you served on boards or committees, it seemed as if you surrounded yourself with friends and peers who had the same mentality, being able to help your community, make it thrive, continue to make it vibrant. Why do you feel it's important to surround yourself with those types of like-minded individuals that had the same genuine spirit that you have?
We were really fortunate because we were at one point going to Holy Family Church. There was a folk mass The kids liked it, and but we got to meet. Not only we'd already known the Mayfies, but we got to meet the Lavertys and the Files and the Marcellas and other families, and we both. It just took off from there. They were interested. We went to a marriage encounter weekend up at the Guggenheim Institute up in Saranac Lake with the Mayfies and also Jim Cordew and Shirley were there, and I'm sure a number of the other folks I've just mentioned. To be perfectly frank, I can't tell you that they were there or not, but I think they were there. At least we continued with that kind of thing for a while, and that brought us together. We had some meetings and fun things that we did as a group, and their example was amazing for Shirley and I. She got involved with Urban Mission. She was a secretary for a few years as a member of the board, and she got involved with that. And of course, she's been a friend of Rosie Laverty's for years. Archie and Rosie were very instrumental in Urban Mission. I think that was just a fortunate thing that happened, that we got to meet these folks that were so, they were generous folks. It rubbed off.
I'm going to jump back to your career here. So you took office as the county DA in 1977, correct? And served in that role for 10 years
76.
Or so?
Me and Jimmy Carter and won that election in 76.
Going in it together. What did you learn the most about serving as the county district attorney?
What did I learn the most? Well, boy, it was an education on in the criminal justice system. I had never been an assistant DA. I'd done a fair amount of criminal defense work mostly as assigned counsel in Jefferson County. Did some in Syracuse for 3 years before I moved up here. So I was attracted to the criminal justice system, the law, the trials of criminal cases. That just kind of zeroed in on that. So in 76, I decided to run for district attorney. You can ask my daughter, Mary Beth, who was 11 at the time, whether that was a good idea or not. We had a very interesting discussion on why I was making this move. She thought I needed to be evaluated psychiatrically because I was crazy, but hey, it worked out. You just never know, but I just thought it was something I wanted to do, and my wife was very, very cooperative. I don't know if she was teaching when I announced I was going to run or not, but she soon became a teacher and full-time in 79, I believe, so it was a little down the line. And so, it was quite an interesting experience. I got to meet a whole slew of lawyers and police officers, law enforcement people, probation officers. I had great relationships with all of those operations and those associations, organizations. We had some memorable trials, memorable, activities going on. It was a great 10 years.
Are there one or two cases, I should say, that stand out in your mind from
sure.
your time?
Yeah, we had I remember, I think about 3 of them, but one of them was with a retired BCI investigator who was ambushed and killed by shotgun in the middle of the night. And that was an adventure, and it had mixed blessings. And 2 of the people involved were convicted, but the shooter went to trial and was acquitted, which was a very, very tough moment in my legal career. At least the alleged shooter, I should say. But and then we had a terrible accident up in Cape Vincent, between Cape Vincent and Clayton. 5 kids were killed in a car accident. That was I was involved with that from investigation through the trial and ultimate disposition. That was a trial that wound up to be a hung jury because we had a bit of a problem with the guy the defendant was not intoxicated. He came in as a blood level under that. It's impaired, and at the time that made a significant difference. So, there were several homicide cases that were extremely interesting, and one thing I tell people, I says, you want to get a baptism by fire of trial work. One of the first or second year, I tried 3 burglary cases. Prosecuted 3 burglary cases to jury verdict in 9 days and a 2-week trial term.
Wow.
On the Friday, after, which was the 10th day, I asked Judge Edward, I says, Judge, you think you could give me the day off from trials today? I'd like to catch up a little bit. He laughed. He says, gee, I think so. So, we had a lot of great experiences. He was a wonderful judge.
Did being in that position, district attorney or county court judge, how did that actually open your eyes up to other community needs that maybe you felt became more important because you got to witness it firsthand or see some of these cases at a deeper level than the public might see?
Yeah, I think, for example, even before becoming district attorney, I did assigned counsel work for 12 years for indigent defendants, and some of the home environment and some of their stories are really tough, and I got an education through that into the drug situations, a lot of drug cases, both defense attorney and his prosecutor. I think you get an idea of the poverty area where a lot of these cases came from was very, very difficult to navigate, and open my eyes to a lot of significant problems.
You served as county court judge for more than 10 years.
Yeah, 12 and a half. Right?
12 and a half. How would you say your approach as a judge differed from what the general public might view a judge to be, or what you see on TV? There's always one perception of how a judge is. How was your approach different?
Well, I was lucky because I think I had a pretty good background. I was, I like to say I sat at the defense counsel's table for 12 years. I sat at the DA's prosecution table for 10 years, and then so I had a pretty good view of the criminal justice system from both sides, and I thought that would serve me well to be fair. Some people that have been prosecutors all their career before they become judge have a view, and you can't help it, of maybe a little bit one-sided view of what should happen in a criminal case. And if you were a defense attorney for your whole career, and that you might have the opposite view or a different view. But you got to have balance if you've seen both sides for 22 years. And so I think that was helpful. I think I could listen to both sides. I tried to be fair to both sides, not only give the defense a fair trial, but the people a fair trial. Both sides are entitled to present their evidence and to have the jury decide the cases. The judge should not interfere with that decision. So it was, I guess I approached it from the standpoint of try to be fair, use your background as balance for making decisions, and call them as you see them, and try to be fair to both sides.
You've been fortunate enough after you retired in 1999 to continue giving back. I mean, your engagement with the community really hasn't stopped. How important is philanthropy in a general sense to the future of the North Country?
Well, I think it's very important because financially we do have problems. We had very generous donors but there's a real need for everybody that can give something to give something back. I was kind of taught by my mother and taught by my faith and I'm a very big believer in the Gospels. If to whom much is given, much is expected, and it is more blessed to give than to receive, and more satisfying. Those are more, they come from the gospel, but they're moral values that I think everybody should have. And if everybody that is fortunate enough to have a little more than they need, they could give, fairly generously to some cause that they believe in, we'd be all the richer. And we need it because we have a lot of needs in this county, in this North Country. I mean, substantial needs. And they could help meet those needs. And we don't want the government to have to fund everything by any means. I mean, good Lord, people pay enough in taxes. And these things, they don't really hurt. I mean, they shouldn't really hurt that much. And I just think that's an answer to keeping the tax level low, is have the donors that can do it, step up to the plate and help.
Well, and your willingness to help hasn't stopped either. You're still volunteering. Meals on Wheels is very close to your heart, I know, and doing some volunteer driving for the Volunteer Transportation Center. So at 78 years old, you're still doing this. You're still giving back. Well, why keep going?
Oh, I love to drive. I really do. I love to drive, and I think it's because when we were in Syracuse growing up, we, like many families, didn't have a car. We took the bus. Everybody got around. We had deliveries of groceries to the homes. How about that? Think that happens anymore? Our milk came in deliveries. You could get by without an automobile. So I didn't get my license until I was like 22. And so I'm making up for it. The times that I didn't drive, I'm driving now. I drive for the Volunteer Center 2 days a week when I can, and I love it. I think it's a great service. I meet an awful lot of nice people. I hear a lot of great stories. It's just, it's a great thing, and it's not hard. You drive an automobile, you can. I'm a glorified taxi driver, I guess, for a number of folks, so that's a great thing. And Meals on Wheels is one of my all-time favorite charities or not-for-profits, because that is a bare bones operation. We have recently been merged into the Urban Mission, which is terrific. They've been great help to us. Our executive director now works full-time, half-time for Meals on Wheels, and then the other half for Urban Mission. She richly deserves it. She's been doing that Meals on Wheels executive director work for over 30 years. Her mother-in-law before her, they're the only two directors of Meals on Wheels in Watertown, and they're wonderful people. And so Donna deserves a lot of credit, and the organization is great. It's pure volunteer work. In other words, the people that drive, and it's not a big deal because it's within 5 miles of the city. The people that drive don't get reimbursed for gasoline or for their time or anything. And man, they come and they drive and they help in more ways than one. Some do it 3-4 days a week, and it's a great organization, and so it's been a lot of fun doing those things. So what the heck, Mike? Well, as long as I'm physically able to do it, why shouldn't I?
Well, and that's such a good point. One of the hopes, I think, for this podcast is to have the younger audience, a younger generation, or should we say really the next generation, to be able to demonstrate philanthropy and giving back to the community much like your generation has. What would you say, or what would you think is the important message that you would want to impart to that audience to just encourage them to give the way you have?
Well, I think I've talked a little bit about that. I just think that the satisfaction you get from helping out someone in need or an organization in need is just makes life worth living. It really does, and it's I think an experience that would be most satisfying to our next generation to try and be helpful. The foundation has started this young people's from different high schools have had a committee that receives some money from the foundation and then makes awards based on their assessing the needs in their particular community, in their area. And that's been, I think it's been terrific. It's been very successful. There are a number of schools that have done that, and I think that's great because that will encourage, obviously, the people that are on those leadership councils as young students, when they obviously will go to college, some of them, and most of them probably, and get positions, and some will have trades where they'll make decent money, and then down the line will be encouraged to do what they did in high school, help out, the organizations that they think are most deserving. And so I think my message is, God bless, go for it. It's a rewarding experience. It makes the community so much better. And, it's just all in all, it's a win-win for everybody.
I think it's a great place to wrap up, too, Lee. It's been a real pleasure to have you offer your personal stories and why philanthropy has meant so much to you and your family and this community. And we appreciate you doing this on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Well, it's a pleasure. Nice talking with you, Max, and good luck in the whole program.
We appreciate it, Lee, and thanks to all of you for tuning in to the podcast with our guest, Lee Clary. We are grateful to have the support of WPBS TV and the Northern New York Community Foundation so we can continue to share these stories on this platform. There are more stories left untold, and we hope to continue sharing them here with you. Stay tuned and keep listening to the Northern New York Community Podcast. Northern New York Community Podcast. Stories from the heart of our community.